Monday, July 1st, 1940. In Britain, the High Command and the Air Chief Marshal, Sir Hugh Dowding, prepare the air defense of the country. The total number of planes in Britain reaches 600. 29 Hurricane squadrons, 16 Spitfire squadrons, and 7 Bolton Defiant bomber squadrons. However, the arrival of military aid from the US continues. Hitler's troops have taken over the Channel Islands, adding to the pressure on Churchill's government. The British also have to face up to the possibility that both Syria and Lebanon, controlled by the French, might become German bases from which attacks may be launched against other countries in the Middle East, with which Britain has defense agreements. In Italy, Marshal Rodolfo Graziani is named Commander-in-Chief of the Italian forces in North Africa and Governor of Libya following the death of Marshal Balbo. In Romania, thousands of Jews flee the areas taken over by the Russians, while the Hungarian government orders a general mobilization. In the Sea War, U-102, commanded by Harel von Klot, sinks the British ship Clearton, although it is later sunk by a destroyer, disappearing with 43 crew members. U-26, commanded by Heinz Scheringer, puts an end to the British freight ship Zarian, but is later sunk by RAF airplanes. In the meantime, U-29, captained by Otto Schuhart, sinks the Greek transport vessel Adamastos. Fritz Julius Lemp's U-30 sinks the British Begnom, and U-65, commanded by Hans von Stockhausen, puts an end to the Dutch ship Amstelland. Tuesday, July 2nd. In France, Marshal Pétain's government is established in the city of Vichy. At the same time, Admiral François Darlan, former chief of the Navy, who had promised that the French fleet would not fall into German hands, is now, after the signing of the armistice, considering the possibility of merging it with the Kriegsmarine. In Britain, Churchill's government is ready to intervene in Syria. Meanwhile, in the Sea War, U-47, commanded by Gunther Prien, sinks the cruise ship Arandora Star off the coast of Ireland. A transatlantic of the Blue Star Line, the Arandora Star was taking more than 1,500 Italian and German prisoners to Canada. 714 of them died. At the same time, U-29, captained by Otto Schuhart, destroys the British freight ship Athiliard and the Panamanian Santa Margarita, while the combat cruiser Scharnhorst is hit by British bombers at the Kiel base. In Germany, Joseph Goebbels meets Hitler at the Berchtesgaden in the Bavarian Alps to plan the triumphal return of the Nazi leader to Berlin after his victorious campaign in Western Europe. In the United States, the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, who was planning to create an army of 10 million men, declares in the Senate that it is necessary to increase aid to the British in order that they maintain their supremacy in the North Atlantic. In Romania, the government orders troops to be concentrated along the border with Hungary, while communist militants in the country are deported to Bessarabia. Wednesday, July 3rd. In London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill fears the French fleet might fall into the hands of the Nazis. In order to avoid this, he orders the Royal Navy to carry out Operation Catapult. The 59 French ships and submarines docked in the English ports of Plymouth and Portsmouth are requisitioned and put under the control of the Admiralty. Admiral James Somerville, heading Force H, which is based in Gibraltar and includes the battleships HMS Hood, HMS Resolution, and HMS Valiant, and the aircraft carrier Ark Royal, receives orders to neutralize all ships of the French fleet stationed in bases in North Africa. The Royal Navy ships position themselves off the port of Mers-el-Kébir in Oran in Algeria. Somerville gives the French admiral in charge, Marcel Gensoul, an ultimatum. His ships are to join the Royal Navy. During the ensuing negotiations, Gensoul receives orders from the man in charge of the French Navy, François Darlan, to reject the British demand, as the ships are there to defend the colonies. Once this message is intercepted by the British, they open fire for 15 minutes, sinking the battleship Britannia and severely damaging the Provence and Dunkirk. More than 1,300 French sailors are killed, and only the cruiser Strasbourg, 5 destroyers, and the carrier Test managed to flee to Toulon in France. In Berlin, under orders from Hitler, General Franz Halder, head of the Army General Staff, assigns a group of officers the task of beginning strategic planning for a campaign against Soviet Russia. In Japan, the press reports that the US and Britain have signed a naval agreement to gain control of the seas in the Far East. Thursday, July 4th. In London, Winston Churchill gives a speech to the House of Commons explaining the reasons for the events in Oran in Algeria. It was the only way in which to avoid Hitler from getting hold of the French fleet, he argues, adding that the British and the American people could judge him now, but history would be his final judge. After a prolonged silence, the chamber gives an enthusiastic ovation. In Washington, a surprised President Roosevelt receives news of the British action. For the American leader and his advisors, it is clear that the British people and their government are determined to fight until the end. The Germans had been convinced that Britain would eventually give in to pressure and the fear of an invasion, and are astonished by the audacity of the British operation against their former ally to maintain naval supremacy. In France, the collaborationist government of Marshal Pétain orders all warships to carry out indiscriminate attacks against any Allied ship spotted. From Italy, planes of the Regia Aeronautica attack the British base on Malta and try unsuccessfully to hit the base at Alexandria in Egypt. In Romania, a new pro-German government is formed, headed by John Gigurtu of the far-right Party of the Nation. Friday, July 5th. In Germany, Hermann Göring personally takes charge of works of art requisitioned in the occupied countries. He will keep some for himself, and others will end up in Alfred Rosenberg's collection or form part of the Hitler Museum set up in the Austrian city of Linz. Aerial actions are stepped up on both sides. RAF planes attack the German naval bases at Kiel and Wilhelmshaven, while units of the Luftwaffe bomb the port of Dover in southeast England. In London, Churchill's government considers the possibility of exiling Sir Oswald Mosley to a distant colony. The founder of the British Union of Fascists has been under arrest for several months. In Washington, in retaliation at the Japanese occupation of part of Indochina, Congress approves an act prohibiting the sale of planes, weapons, and chemical products to Japan. In New York, several members of the German-American Bund are arrested after demonstrating on Independence Day with Nazi symbols. In France, Petain's pro-German government announces it is breaking off diplomatic ties with Britain and makes radio broadcasts calling on the British people to hang Churchill in Trafalgar Square. In the Sea War, U-34, commanded by Wilhelm Röllmann, sinks HMS Whirlwind, and Otto Kretschmer's U-99 sinks the Canadian merchantman Magog. Saturday, July 6th. For the first time after his victory in the West, Hitler returns to Berlin. He is welcomed by Göring, von Brauchitsch, and other members of the High Command. The city streets are strewn with flowers and draped with flags. The Nazi leader appears in the balcony of the Chancellery to receive the enthusiastic cheers of the crowd. Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the OKW, the High Command of the Armed Forces, tells the crowd that Hitler is Germany's greatest ever leader, while Hermann Göring praises his qualities as a strategist and compares him with Frederick the Great. In London, the intelligence service warns the government that more than 1,000 German bombers are being prepared to act against Britain from airfields located in northern Europe. Fighter Command places its radar stations in the east and south on maximum alert, while Bomber Command orders a new attack against the Libyan port of Tobruk, controlled by the Italians. In the Sea War, the French cruiser Frondeur is sunk by Royal Navy destroyers off the coasts of Cyprus. Meanwhile, British ships blockade the French island of Martinique in the Caribbean Sea in order to prevent the aircraft carrier Bern from reaching France. The vessel has a crew of 875 men and is carrying 40 airplanes purchased in the United States before the German invasion. In France, the Vichy government, in the person of Pierre Laval, one of its most fervent collaborators, makes public the draft of the new French constitution based on a single party.